Hi everyone, this is Ben coming to you live. Our weather right now is actually pretty fantastic. It'll be a really nice night for driving movies.
Normally expect 200 to 300,
514, 900 cars. That's a lot of people in here.
My buddy says, hey, whatever happened to that drive-in idea? He goes, put it in your backyard.
That night, it was like an infusion in me to bring it back, to make it happen.
There was something called showmanship.
Beer garden is open, he's making white Russians.
You're not gonna get that on your TV at home.
It's all a labor of love.
Yeah, we're still in the midst of this uncertainty. Day and date streaming with new movies, is that going to be a permanent thing?
Counting what we made today, $5.
Biggest problem now is having employees, people to help, barely getting by.
And then you get into, what the hell's gonna happen to me today?
This is our current situation.
Movies used to mean something, and people used to anticipate their release. Will it survive? I don't know.
I thought it would really be fun to spend our retirement at a drive-in. I didn't realize that we would spend our retirements on a drive-in.
I think that one of the positives is more people will go to drive-ins that maybe hadn't gone before.
I fell in love with it. This is like the best form of entertainment.
When the kids get out of the car, the smile on their face, you can't put a price on that.
It's memories that people will keep forever.
Y'all enjoy the movie.
On US digital platforms from March 14 is Back to the Drive-In, a behind-the-scenes visit to 11 family-owned drive-ins that captures the passion and determination needed to keep their piece of American pop culture history alive. It is the latest fascinating and heartfelt work from a wonderful documentarian, April Wright, who joins us here on Screen Watching. Thank you so much for being part of the show.
Yes, and thank you for having me. Happy to talk to an Australian.
Good to
I'm part Australian.
This is what I find fascinating. Now, give us a little bit of a backstory about your connection to the country.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. My grandfather, Charles Wright, my last name, was born on Kangaroo Island, and so was his father, John Wright. And they came to the United States when my grandfather was young. And but yeah, we had a few generations in South Australia, on Kangaroo Island. All the Wrights that are left in Adelaide and Kangaroo Island are all relatives. And then I grew up here, but I've been there to visit. I've been to Australia a couple times, and I love it there, of course. I feel like I'm home when I go visit there. I really love it.
We think you're home. I mean, it's you've got that down-to-earth quality that we love about Aussies. So it's
yeah,
good to have you.
I do for sure. And our family always were very aware that we were part Australian.
Wonderful.
So pretty cool.
Listen, some might say the drive-in experience hasn't changed in more than half a century, I guess. 10 years on from your landmark documentary going attractions, what appeared different to you this time around?
Well, the first documentary I did on drive-ins was really following the history, the invention and all the ups and downs over the years. And at the time I was finishing that film, the digital revolution was the whole big thing, switching from film to digital projectors. And a lot of the multiplexes had support financially through the studio system to make that conversion in a big way.
Yep.
And they left some of the little guys behind, which included some of the art house theaters and the drive-ins. So people were wondering, could they afford that big price tag? Well, it turned out most of the drive-ins did make the conversion. It wasn't as big of a thing as they thought it would be. But I wanted to go back to the drive-in, as the title implies, because I wanted to show that they're pretty much all family-owned businesses. And it's really about what they are as part of their communities and what these families put in, and that they go through a lot of hustle and work to keep these drive-ins going, and that there's so much passion behind it. I just wanted to show how much they put into it. You know, we come to see a show, but they come in at 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and they don't leave till 2 or 3 that night, you know, early morning hours. So
Sure.
There's a lot that goes into it. And I wanted to pull back the curtain and show what's involved and why you should support them, because I think it's important to keep the drive-ins alive.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Leads right into my next question. The first thing that I loved about your film was that there isn't a single frame of irony. There's not a single moment when you say how quaint or cute or retro running a drive-in is. These are clearly people you have, who have chosen a way of life that you admire.
Yeah, and what you said is really great. Other people have done some documentaries that are about the nostalgic side of the drive-in and yeah, the quaint and cute, no, look what we used to do. But for the people that I'm following, this is their life and their livelihood. It's very much in the present. They were dealing with COVID. They're dealing with other issues. Drive-ins are alive and breathing for them. It is their life. It's something they're committed to. Their customers, come to it often. They're like family businesses, and the customers and the employees become part of the family too. So it's not a thing of the past. It's not a retro thing, even though some of them are from that era. They're very modern at the same time.
It's a love letter to the drive-in life and those that choose it, but it's not at the expense of highlighting the hardships of owning and running a drive-in, which you alluded to in your first answer there. Did the narrative of the documentary sort of play out as you thought it would, or is the nature of the documentary beast one that it evolves in the editing room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's always discovery involved. So when I first wanted to make this follow-up film and sort of dig deeper into the families, I was only planning to follow 2 or 3 families, and this was prior to COVID. And just really go behind the scenes of what they're doing. When COVID happened, it brought an extra layer to the story because suddenly drive-ins were in the press. Everybody was talking about them. They were the only thing open for a while. So a lot of things that were inside, like concerts and graduations and church services and stand-up comedy, all these things started happening at the drive-in during COVID. And they did have a bit of a bump, and they definitely had a bump in just awareness, which was really great. But then I kind of knew that it wasn't all, sunshine and roses. They weren't printing money. There was a lot of challenges. There were unruly customers, kind of like the airlines were having issues with people who didn't want to follow the rules. There were people who went to drive-ins to have a good time who didn't want to follow the rules. There were supply chain issues. They couldn't get nacho cheese. They couldn't get popcorn buckets. All these things were happening. And I was hearing a few of the stories. And that's when I expanded it to 11 drive-ins in 8 states. So I drove from Los Angeles across the country and back to visit all these drive-ins because I really thought there would be differences. And I chose drive-ins that, had 7 screens and some that had 1. I chose some that were like in a city, some that were very rural, some that were very old, had been around for decades, and some that had just opened 3 weeks before I got there. And I thought, I'll get different points of view. And as soon as I went to the first few, I was like, no, I'm not getting different points of view. They're all telling me the exact same thing. So I didn't know that was going to happen. And I think that was one of the messages that I discovered along the way, that we're all in this together. They're all in this together. They're all sort of in the same fight to keep their drive-ins alive. They have the same passion and determination. So it wasn't that different. There were specific things that were different, that if you watch the film, obviously, one is dealing with fog and one's dealing with rain, and there's different things going on. But yeah, that's what really amazed me once I got on the road. I just was like, they're all telling me different versions of the same themes. And I was not expecting that.
What I love when I watch a documentary about cinema and find that it's very cinematic, that's really thrills me. The ubiquitous drone shot, which is very common in documentaries, in all sorts of filmmaking nowadays. I don't think I've seen it used more beautifully than in this film. It's got some amazing aerial sequences. Give us a bit of an insight into this.
I'm the drone pilot. I did that.
Did you really? It cuts together beautifully.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. Like you said, I did make another documentary about drive-ins that came out literally 10 years ago. It's the 10-year anniversary, but I shot it a little bit before then, and I didn't have drones. And when the drive-in owner said, why do you want to make another movie on this topic? I kind of jokingly told them because there are drones now, but I was also serious that I knew I could capture them in a different way that you can't from the ground. And so I really wanted to, just pull people in and let you see that they really are a venue, that they have a shape and they have a design. And I always say this when I go to visit a drive-in, when you pull onto the property and you're in this environment, you can just tell it's going to be fun. This is a special place. It's designed for entertainment. And yeah, and you just can tell there's kind of a buzz once you get on a drive-in property that, you know, you're in a really great space and something's going to happen here that's cool.
I'm reminded, and I was reminded of the story of the film Bonnie and Clyde, which Warner Brothers infamously was planning to dump as a quote-unquote Texas drive-in filler until critics started raving about it. There's a little bit in the film, and you mentioned it previously, about that sort of red-haired second cousin relationship that drive-ins have with Hollywood studios, which was really tested during COVID when the streaming, you know, films went straight to streaming and bypassed cinemas and all that sort of stuff. Has that changed? Is that still a source of much contention for the drive-in owners?
Yeah, I think they're still really underdogs in a way. You know, there's less of them than there used to be. Now, ironically, they kind of saved Hollywood in a way during the pandemic, because they did allow people to still leave their houses and go see movies in theaters. So I think people were really surprised that they had that comeback, and that increased the awareness, and people did see the value. And when people went to the drive-in during COVID, that's the other reason I named the movie Back to the Drive-In, because during COVID, a lot of people went back to the drive-in who hadn't been in decades, got to have that experience again, and they enjoyed it. So, you know, it was a way to remind us. But yeah, the studios are tough. A lot of the policies that they have and the terms to use the movies, they are a bit more favorable to the bigger chains.
Yeah.
Because if you're a single screen theater, whether you're a drive-in or an art house theater, and you're in a more rural market and you have to keep the same movie on screen for 4 weeks and you can't change it and you can't play anything else, that really ties your hands in a pretty negative way. So I wish that they would have different types of terms based on the type of venue that are more favorable. But yeah, the drive-ins are sort of an afterthought, I think, in a lot of the theatrical strategy. So you know, it's interesting. During COVID, obviously they were, and even when indoors started moving, you know, reopening, you were still seeing the top box office numbers all on drive-in screens. So you know, for the drive-ins to be the, you know, the top grossing places over COVID, that hadn't happened for a while.
That's extraordinary. Yeah. I think my favorite, only because I'd love to experience the projected image being captured sort of midair by the fog, was the Wellfleet drive-in in Cape Cod. I thought that would have been, I mean, I wouldn't want to see Avatar or something there, but I would love to see what the image captured in the fog would have looked like. Did you have a favorite amongst the drive-ins in the film?
No, I can't pick among them. I mean, they're all my favorites, but what turned out nicely, and you can't plan this in drive-ins, but it's really like each location ended up having its own little mini plot line. So for the Wellfleet, the fog was coming in. Were they going to be able to put on the show? Was he going to have to refund the tickets? You know, were you going to be able to see the picture? It kept you in suspense. But then there were others, you know, like the Harvest Moon, that's really about the expanding family, that they have a new daughter, and one of the brothers that runs it just, you know, got married recently, and now she's getting caught up in drive-in life. So and then like the Brazos, she's trying, the woman who owns that one, Jennifer Miller, she's trying to sell it, so she's very, you know, nostalgic about her experience of owning it, because she's getting to the end of her ownership and she wants to pass it along to somebody else. So it just kind of worked out that way, that each drive-in seemed to have sort of one thing that we could really focus on, to give each of them kind of a unique plot line throughout the film. You just get lucky sometimes like that when you make a documentary. You don't know exactly how it's going to work. I initially thought maybe things would be grouped by topic, but I just kind of realized, because they were all having their own stories that were unfolding, that were unique, I could just go through one long night, but you know, check in with the different locations. So you feel like you've spent a night at these places and seen behind the scenes what all these crazy things that are happening.
It's a wonderful journey through these people's lives, I have to say. I've been to LA a couple of times, and one of my great regrets now is not having visited Mission Tiki, which closed at the end of January, and the film points out it was overtaken by developers' dollars. Will you be able to revisit these people in a decade's time? Is the drive-in here to stay in its current form, or does the business model need a radical overhaul?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the whole cinema industry is in a bunch of disruption right now. It already was with streaming, but COVID accelerated some of that. Now, I think in a positive way for theatrical exhibition, they had a chance to send a lot of things straight to streaming. And I don't think financially the results were as good as when you have that theatrical component. So I think most of the studios have realized that is important. But it's tough, it's tough to leave the house. And, but I think it's worth it, because when you go somewhere to see a movie, it's a night out. And especially when you go to a drive-in, it's a total experience. You're outside, you're having good food, you're having different food than you can have at indoor theaters usually. Sometimes there's a play area for the kids. You can socialize with the people that you're with. So it really is a full experience beyond the movie. And, it's just about creating good memories, which is what the drive-in has always been about. So the fact that it has all these added elements, I think gives it some advantage, that it's more of a destination. I hope it is.
April, it's been so lovely talking to you. A little bit of a plug for myself here. As we record this in a few days' time on Friday, I'm actually hosting a drive-in screening here in Sydney at the Blacktown Drive-In for an old Australian Ozploitation film called Dead End Drive-In. So the drive-in experience for me is one that I'm endeared to. The very first movie I saw was Disney's Peter Pan at the North Ryde Drive-In here in Sydney. So I loved your documentary, and I'm looking forward to it rolling out across the world in the months ahead. And thank you so much for joining us on Screen Watching.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.